Greetings, friends. If you've come to this channel for a genuine, in-depth analysis of military hardware, without any gloss or propaganda, you're in the right place. Be sure to subscribe and hit the bell, because today we are unpacking a story that says a lot about the state of our army and defense industry. This is the story of a tank that wasn't supposed to come back, but did. A Phoenix tank. The T-80BVM. And this isn't just a story about hardware. It's a story about forced decisions, crisis, adaptation, and how, under conditions of extreme time pressure and sanctions, they are trying to patch the gigantic holes in the armor of national security. Comment right away with what you think about the topic. Do you agree with this approach, or is it a dead end? Let's go. Imagine the doors of the assembly shop at the famous Uralvagonzavod in Nizhny Tagil. The year is 2011. Noise, rumble, but not like before. The conveyor belt that had been stamping out T-90 as for years, the pinnacle of Soviet-Russian tank design at the time, albeit with a debatable reputation in the West, is stopping. The last serial tank leaves the shop. It seemed like the end of an era. But no, the era didn't end. It just changed sharply and rudely. Instead of creating something new, the plant switched to what in the automotive world is called a facelift, or even an overhaul of a used vehicle. The focus fell on the old, reliable, or more accurately, already very worn-out T-72B and B1 models, of which there were countless numbers in the troops and in storage. They began to be extensively repaired and turned into T-72B3S. Cheap, fierce, fast. Essentially, this was the first but loud admission. There was no money for mass production of new tanks under the supermodern Armata project, that same Object 148, or the project was raw and the fleet was rapidly aging. Something urgently needed to be done. And what was happening in Omsk at the transport machine building plant? Here, there was a special, distinct history. This plant is the home of the 80s, tanks with a gas turbine heart. The T-80 is a special cast. Expensive, complex, fuel-hungry, but incredibly fast and powerful. They were created for breakthroughs into NATO's deep defenses on the European theater, where every hour, every minute of the offensive would cost whole divisions. But after the collapse of the Union, the concept of giant armored fists became irrelevant. The high cost of maintaining and repairing these sports cars among tanks led to a sad decision. They began to be withdrawn from troops and sent for long-term storage, essentially to a slow death in the open air. The Omsk plant withered. Its unique expertise in gas turbine engines was not needed. It seemed the fate of the T-80 was sealed. But then big history intervened. Geopolitics, so loved for discussion in offices, struck these plans with a sledgehammer. 2014, Crimea, sanctions, a new confrontation with the West. Suddenly, it became clear that even repaired and modernized 72s would not be enough for all potential threats. And Armata, which had driven beautifully in parades, just wasn't entering series production. A vacuum arose. And then someone in the offices of the Ministry of Defense or in headquarters looked at the rows of mothballed T-80BVs overgrown with weeds and asked, "What if?" Thus was born the program that, from a desperate measure, became one of the symbols of the current decade. The T-80BVM, a tank of forced necessity. Think about that word, forced. No one dreamed of creating it. It was created because there was no other way out under those conditions. The Omsk plant got a second wind. Not to build from scratch, but to repair and radically update what it had once made itself. The first showing of the new old lady took place in the autumn of 2017 at the Zapad 2017 exercises. Next to it stood the more glamorous T-90M and T-72B3M, but the eyes of many experts were drawn precisely to the 80. Why? Because it was a sign that the Army was giving up on trying to get something fundamentally new and was beginning a total mobilization of the entire old stock. And this sign could be read in every detail. So what was the result? The engineers were given the task: increase firepower and protection without killing the main advantage, phenomenal mobility. And they took the path of least resistance and maximum unification with what already existed. Not ideal, but fast. The main gun, the good old 125mm 2A46M1, the same one that has been on tanks since the 70s. Yes, more advanced guns have long been developed to replace it, but the logic here is simple. Thousands of barrels have been stockpiled, production is established, ammunition is plentiful. And most importantly, it allows firing new shells, like the Svinets lead, an old rifle but new, more accurate and penetrating bullets. Instead of the ancient, complex and capricious Cobra guided missile system, they installed the relatively modern Reflex, which can be called the standard for Russian tanks of the last 30 years. Again, not new, but reliable and available in warehouses. The heart of the modernization became the fire control system. Here, a breakthrough. The gunner received a multi-channel SOSNU sight with a thermal imager, a digital ballistic computer. These are new generation eyes for an old tank. The commander, alas, received a simplified solution like on the T-72BVM, just a screen with the gunner's picture and a duplicate button. Not the best solution for situational control in battle, but cheap and fast. And now, the armor. This is the most interesting and revealing part. The tank's turret is its weak point. For the T-80BVM, it's a cast steel hemisphere. Against shells from the 70s and 80s, it was still okay, but against modern tank and anti-tank artillery, almost useless. Can it be made modern? Theoretically, yes, by replacing it with a new welded one with large angles of inclination and special steel inserts. But that's long, expensive, and complicated. So they took a different path. They hung new, relict, explosive reactive armor modules on the old turret. It's like putting a modern level 4 bulletproof vest on a medieval knight in chainmail. Yes, protection improved radically, especially against shape charge projectiles, ATGMs, RPGs. But the turret's own structure, its shape, steel thickness, remained the Achilles heel. The front of the hull was covered well, but the sides and, critically, the roof of the turret weakly. This was a conscious compromise between protection, timing, and cost. And here we come to the main feature, the soul of this machine, the engine. The gas-turbine GTD-1250. Power around 1,300 horsepower. Imagine a 1.5-ton SUV with a 500 horsepower engine. That's a monster. And here we have 46 tons of metal with such thrust. Specific power around 30 horses per ton. This is stunning acceleration dynamics, speed, maneuverability. But you have to pay for everything. And here the payment is fuel. The fuel consumption of this ravenous beast is 1.5 to 2 times higher than that of diesel T-72s and T-90s. In peacetime, this is a huge expense item for the budget. Under wartime conditions, when fuel logistics is the lifeblood of the army, this becomes a strategic problem. And another huge drawback, the lack of an auxiliary power unit, APU. Simply put, to power all the tank's electronics sites, radios, computers, you have to start the main engine. And it, I remind you, eats fuel like crazy. When stationary, in an ambush, with the crew working inside, this is both a giveaway, noise, thermal signature, and a senseless waste of precious fuel. On the later, more advanced T-80U, there was such a unit. On the BVM, there isn't. Economy again, or an oversight. And so we come to the most important part, to the reason why all this was needed at all. 2022, the start of the special military operation. And the T-80BVMs, modernized by the hundreds, went to the front. And there they encountered not hypothetical NATO tanks, but the harsh, dirty trench warfare of a new generation. A war where the main killers of tanks were not other tanks, but artillery, portable anti-tank systems, Javelin, NLAW, and, most importantly, drones. FPV kamikaze drones, darting around like wasps and hitting precisely the weak spots. The turret roof, the engine grills, the rear. And here it turned out that even relict and high speed were not a panacea. Tanks began to burn, to suffer losses, and the engineers had to improvise again on the fly under fire in a time crunch. Thus appeared the T-80BVM of the 2023-24 model years. This is no longer just a modernization, this is a reaction to battlefield challenges in real time. They started hanging everything on the tank that could help it survive. Side skirts along the entire length of the tracks, like on the T-90M, to protect against RPGs from the side. Additional slat armor on the rear and sides against drones. They hoisted whole metal cages and canopies with explosive reactive armor onto the turret roof, an attempt to somehow cover the mortally vulnerable top projection. Camouflage kits like Nikita and Ternovnik appeared to hide the thermal signature. And, perhaps most importantly, radio-electronic warfare systems, like Volnares, designed to jam the control channels of those same FPV drones. The tank began to look like a hedgehog, covered with survival tools. Rough, spiky, ugly, but desperately clinging to life. And you know what's most paradoxical? Under these conditions, some of the T-80BVM's congenital diseases even turned out to be advantages. Its gas turbine engine, for all its flaws, starts instantly, even in bitter cold, which is a problem for diesel tanks. And its high speed and maneuverability sometimes allow it to escape from under an artillery barrage or quickly change position after firing. This is a tank for active, daring actions, not for static defense. But the volumes needed are such that even Sosnas are becoming scarce. On some vehicles, they are now installing a simplified thermal imaging sight, the 1PN96MT, and bringing back the old 1A42 fire control system. A step back? Yes. But it's a step that allows them to push another 100 tanks into the troops in the same time and for the same money. And it's only justified under conditions of total shortage of everything. So what do we have in the end? The T-80BVM is a monument to the Russian military-industrial complex in an era of crisis and sanctions. It's a tank of compromise. A tank that says, we can't do it perfectly, but we can do a lot, and we can do it now. Its appearance is an admission of the failure of the Armata program as a mass project for the next decade. It's a statement that the bet is placed on the Soviet inheritance, which can be quickly and relatively cheaply brought into decent shape. Is such a bet justified? From the point of view of urgently patching holes, absolutely. These machines are fighting, they are needed at the front here and now. But from a long-term perspective, from the point of view of technological sovereignty, it's a dead end. You can't squeeze the 30th drop of juice out of designs that are 50 years old forever. Sooner or later, the modernization potential will be exhausted, and the enemy will learn to hit precisely these already studied weak points. The T-80BVM is both a hero and a victim. A hero because it returned from oblivion and took the blow. A victim because its return is a symptom of deep systemic problems that cannot be solved by just repairing old tanks. It is the forced necessity of an army that was not given new weapons in time. And in the plants in Omsk and Nizhny Tagil, the conveyors continue to work. More and more old tanks are leaving the gates. The work, as they say, is still endless. Because war is not only about the technologies of the future. It is very often about the ability to use what is left from the past most effectively. Friends, this story is just one piece of the huge and terrible picture of modern warfare. If you are interested in how equipment fights, what tactics work and what doesn't, and what awaits us all in the future, be sure to subscribe to the channel. Put a like on this video if you enjoy such in-depth analysis. And most importantly, write in the comments. What do you think? Is the T-80BVM a brilliant salvation of the situation or a sign of backwardness? Was it worth investing so much effort into an old platform? We are waiting for your opinion. Only this way can we build an honest and interesting dialogue. This was Host Name. Until next time on air.